Bueno, muy buenos días a todos y bienvenidos al webinar de ACI-LAC, la importancia de la
Good
adaptabilidad.
morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the webinar, The Importance of Adaptability of Organizations in Times of Uncertainty. Soon this week, we will hold the General Assembly of ACI-LAC. I want to share with you, we've done more than 20 webinars. We're available for any topic you want to develop in our platform. And this occasion for this webinar, we count with the participation of Lucia Muñoz, partner of Deloitte, also Fernando Salzone, director of Corporación América Uruguay, Alcira Enriquez, Human Talent QUIPORT, and Carlos Gomez, Manager of Human Development and Management, Lima Airport Partners. Before we go on to the presentations, I would like to share more or less how the webinar will work out. As you can see, we have simultaneous interpretation. The only thing you need to do is in the main menu, in the lower part of your screen, choose your channel of preference. And so the voices of the panelists and the interpreter, Paul, will not overlap. Please choose the last option, mute original audio. Last, I want to tell you that questions will be developed at the end of the presentations, and the chat option, as you can see, is disabled. Thereby, we will be receiving questions through the address you see on the screen. You can send your questions throughout the presentations. Please let us know the person whom you're addressing the question to. Without any further ado, I give the floor to Lucia Muñoz, Deloitte partner, who will give us some introductory words for today's webinar. Thank you very much, Francisco. Welcome, everyone. It's a true pleasure to accompany you this morning or noon, wherever any one of us is located. As Francisco mentioned, my name is Lucia Muñoz. I'm partner of Deloitte in consultancies specifically for human capital. And I'm based in Uruguay. But somehow my scope is throughout the whole region. It's a true pleasure to accompany you today in such an important and interesting topic. We will be conversing about the need of adaptability for the organizations, something that maybe had been a relevant topic in the past, and we had been discussing it constantly, but clearly in the last few months, it became something that accelerated itself. Well, apparently the pandemic was a time machine that took us towards the future in how we work and how we organize our companies. In our future work, all things came sooner, the new future that we are part of. So today, this is what we will discuss. And Francisco, please, we will let you know about today's agenda. First of all, we will tell you what are those impacts of the context, what somehow we had been discussing in the past, as I mentioned, and what is all that arises more strongly. And I will emphasize on those elements that this industry has as part of the reality we're all living. Then we will talk about the adaptable organization, a concept that many of you might have heard in different ways, like flexible organizations, adaptable organizations, liquid organizations. There are many concepts or names for this organizational concept. And then we will discuss and compare, and we will have the pleasure of listening to some panelists, Fernando, Alcira, and Carlos, who will be commenting and will be telling us about their experience. They will provide us with examples, success examples that were implemented in the last few months about adaptability. And we will leave some time for Q&A, questions and answers. Francisco already mentioned the link so you can send your questions. It will be a true pleasure to answer your questions. Having said this, Francisco, well, somehow this phrase is it's a great example of what we have evidenced during this time. If somehow we go back a few months back, everything seemed to be against us somehow. With continuing being successful, continuing working, continuing with our day-to-day tasks, our work, making things were so difficult, and it was difficult to make passengers feel safe. So in this framework, every organization had lots of learned lessons from itself and from other organizations to truly strengthen itself and transform itself so it could accompany these changes in this context and prosper. From Deloitte, we say organizations went through different phases. First, they responded to what was ongoing, and then they started to recover. And somehow, this is the phase where most organizations are going through, and they're starting to strengthen themselves. And the next stage will imply this takeoff so we can prosper in a new context, in a new normality, in a new reality that is here to stay. And somehow the organizations that are able to adapt and to truly be resilient organizations are those that somehow will prosper greatly. We will discuss some topics that we have been discussing before also. The truth is, before February, we had been discussing some concepts that seem very futuristic. And currently, they are even a bit short with the challenges that organizations are facing in this current reality. We had been discussing already a tsunami of data. Organizations currently generate so much data, so much information, that they can only process 0.05% of this information or data they can generate. Can you imagine if we could integrate all this other data that we can process, what we could do with it? Technology that is everywhere, more and more diversity in our labor force, other ways of outsourcing, contingencies that appear and start to fill in the voids or fill in the points. We estimate that a child that is born today with evidently all proper care and in the best possible environment could live up to 120 years. So we're talking about 100-year careers. Can you imagine the connection with organizations? Well, go beyond our current retirement age, and it's getting longer and longer. But at the same time, we have different generations coexisting with each other. And we have customers demanding more and more things in a digital revolution like we have never seen before, or we were expecting before. Hand in hand with this, we have all the vulnerability of automation that somehow demands that we remain alert and we reconvert ourselves. And of course, all the evolution and regulations. This is a whole context that demanded resilient organizations that were different, that could act differently. What we already saw is that those organizations that would be resilient and very flexible and adaptable to their environment around them, those were the ones that survived. And as we say, could prosper. There are great examples of organizations that somehow disappeared because they did not have this flexibility and somehow they could not react quickly to their surroundings. This is what we will discuss today. We will talk about what are those characteristics that can launch an organization to be more stable, more adaptable. What could we do in our organizations currently to become resilient organizations, flexible, adaptable? And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter our size. So we function and operate as with flexibility and like a startup company to respond quickly and be stronger in function of the realities of our suppliers, customers, so we can act somehow in a safe manner. If we continue, we can visualize that this whole story we had until a few months ago has been absolutely shaken by what happened these last few months. The truth is all industries, all organizations had their characteristics. And in fact, I believe one of the beautiful places that we as consultants must mention, well, we had leaders of the most varied organizations and areas, and everybody had the same problems. What could we do to continue being relevant, to operate quickly, to be able to respond to all urgencies that were being demanded and continue with a business that could truly continue and progress? At the same time, that safety, safety to my customers was on the table. The truth is, from Deloitte, we work in touch with several organizations of the industry. We started to understand elements that you also understand. Elements like you can see on the screen now that have been ongoing now for several months. But the truth is, we all started to find out, to realize that the preferences of our customers are changing, preferences and characteristics of the organizations are changing. So it's not enough to compensate with previous aspects. Besides this, we started to understand that there are new other parameters. Certainly, every passenger that arrives in our airports currently will demand more health and cleanliness and other issues that were also important, like quickness, agility. We need to understand, we need to re-strengthen ourselves. This is coming here to stay. We need to understand this. So the more adaptable as organizations we are to respond quickly to the changing needs, the better we will be able to respond to the future. And those organizations, our airports, our customers, our talents have to grow also. As industries, we need to maintain those key talents. For this, we need to ensure that as organizations, we are generating how we get organized in order to respond to all these topics or issues. So it was always important to have the customer experience, passenger experience, the talent experience, but this is even more important than ever. And more than ever, today we have to have this capacity to have like our sensors must be totally sharp everywhere to understand what is going on and to be able to respond quickly. We were saying that clearly cleanliness, to be able to have safety, security around this, and that these preferences are key. We also understand that currently there are several organizations in the industry that are taking an extra step, trying to understand how do we get ready then? How do we get prepared? So what do we do to somehow start to set ourselves up? And so we have several topics or issues that are arising that we will connect with this concept of adaptable organizations. To start with, the first focus we have is to understand the behavior and changes in behavior of our customers. What is it that somehow starts to change? What will continue changing? What will be those preferences that truly will stay and will be necessary and related to this? And then to be able to understand what are the services with more priorities, to start to prioritize coming back to operations and be convinced we're following a plan that is totally connected with the preferences of our passengers, or somehow continue identifying opportunities to ensure that we're providing that trust. And I repeat, not only to our passengers, but only that talent that day to day is working with us. Another one of the elements that is coming up strong, of course, you've seen it, you've been in touch with this, how to look for technology solutions that are totally touchless, seamless, but at the same time providing experiences to ensure that all the time we are retelling recounting the needs of our customers. And last, a lot of data, a lot of information constantly to be able to see what is ongoing and how to act. This opens up something that is happening now more than ever. Today's forum, for instance, and talking to Francisco, he was telling us about the huge number of webinars we've been having all this time. To connect with the airport industry and other organizations is part of what's coming to stay. We need to ensure we're having a deep contact with what is happening beyond my organization. We need to start understanding what the best practices are, how to take advantage of all elements and new elements, because the last few months in COVID, it's a time machine, not only for going towards the future in some places, but each one of our countries has a different reality today. We have more or less traffic in view of what is happening. So to understand from others is key. It's here to stay. And all of this starts to be more and more important. It's a truth test of some elements that, as I was saying, we had been discussing. And somehow, I invite you to think we're starting to operate differently. And the reality is that as organizations, and now it doesn't matter the industry we are in, we already knew that the measure we could stop thinking traditionally and truly connect with things that we did not know how they would work out. Well, this started to be key important to understand if we would continue being relevant as organizations. And this is where we started to connect everything and to understand more than ever. Now we need to be organizations that are strong, but strong in the sense of knowing we have some deeply embedded elements in our culture, but everything else is changing. The rest is flexible, it's resilient. And when we have disruptions or affections or destabilizations because of the pandemic, new technologies, we will know how to operate. We will know how to work together in order to face these challenges and face and prosper in the future. So from Deloitte, we started to talk about adaptable organizations. Where you would see now is this sort of continuum from from the common old traditional characteristics that we had been operating with towards those that go towards adaptable organizations, which you can see on your right. And the reality is that everything we just discussed, recounting the destabilizations, affections, and this industry and others, it shows us more and more where we must go if we truly want to continue being relevant, responding in a quick and resilient manner to challenges. And as I was saying, with the final objective to prosper. The first element we see here is that the organizations, traditional organizations, had a more marked, stronger focus in profit. They were profit-driven in profits, which is still relevant. But traditional organizations now are starting to include other elements. So they're becoming adaptable organizations. And this is the common purpose. Adaptable organizations have a big common purpose, which guides and moves everything they do. And in this time, I think any of you, if you connect with what has been the collective strength during this pandemic, if we do this, we start to look at the clear purpose. There was a big common enemy these last few months that made us join together and have a purpose. No matter we were employees working 24/7, outsourced persons, government, customers, other airports, other organizations. The truth of the matter is we were all driving for the same thing. And that is the purpose of an adaptable organization. We need to wonder what is going to be the next purpose when this stops. What is it that is going to join us strongly as organizations, no matter where we are, where we're going? What are those elements we need to have? And then the second point involves an internal focus that traditional organizations had, and now they're more connected with the customers, more ecosystem focused. And this becomes absolutely relevant in an organization that wants to be active with what is ongoing around it, to be pending with others. Flexible networks. This is the third element of an adaptable organization compared to a more hierarchical structure, which I still have. But more than ever, I have teams that connect and disconnect to work with different purposes, visions, projects, and these people come from different places and they connect with each other because they're the best to carry out these tasks. Expeditious, agile governance, collaboration, as compared to the opposite, which complicates interactions, which are silo type of interactions, an element that involves individualized talent, understanding which are the populations of collaborators I have in my organization, how to respond better to everyone, somehow with the same focus for everyone, when in fact I have different communities. And last, an organization that learns continuously, that changes continuously, vis-a-vis that idea we had in the past, that people resisted to change. In fact, we have learned that if we have the information, the purpose, well, we don't resist change. Quite the opposite. We truly are part of the changes and are more energized. In the next 5 minutes, before leaving the rest of the panelists that will be telling us about specific cases, I will tell you about how this adaptable organization, what it looks like. If we went inside this adaptable organization, what does it look like? How can we simplify this reality? If I had to design my organization to be more adaptable, where would I start? We have 5 levels here, which are the 5 levels. I will not stop too much. We will discuss each one of them, but only for you to have a quick overview. What we say from Deloitte when we talk about the adaptable organization, it involves these 5 elements. And we say, first of all, it involves the ecosystem. Adaptable organizations are connected with the ecosystem. How it's organized, the second level, it's the organization itself. The team is the main cell, or they are the main cells. The leader are enabling leaders, and last, the individual with some specific characteristics. All of this is what sets up this adaptable organization, and this makes it that we somehow are resilient organizations that can operate, as we were saying, in destabilized environments, and we're ready to receive instructions, and we can prosper in new environments. This is the first level, the ecosystem. The ecosystem, as I was saying a few minutes ago, has the big key point, which is the shared purpose. The organizations, the adaptable organizations, have a clear common purpose. This is very important because what the ecosystem states is that organizations that are interconnected with a much broader environment, not only look inside. These are similar organizations, strategic alliances from mind to market, and to respond to the passengers, customers in a timely manner. They start to have more data to make decisions, and this also helps in this sense to respond quickly so we can adapt and change if we need to do so. They start also to get organized in view of how people prefer to work. And now, in like the flow chart I showed you, without looking at the nature of the work, they start to shorten costs, to lower costs, because which we are much more efficient. We can change quickly in view of the needs of the different public. And last, there is a lot more transparency and collaboration. And to finish, I want to tell you that in this almost half hour, one of the projects we have enjoyed the most during this time and we're still working on this, was to work under this model and connecting adaptable organizations and accompanying Corporación América in Uruguay in this transformation. And this is why it seemed to us a very powerful connection to provide you and provide you all this data and information based on reality and tell you how from this whole model we also have organizations that are starting to apply it, and they're starting to create and think differently. Well, and now I give the floor to Fernando Sansone, who will give us specific examples how they started working on adaptable organizations. Well, good morning to everyone. Thank you, Lucia. As I was saying, the idea is to share with you one of the experiences or decisions we have taken in this framework of crisis or sanitation emergency. We call our team or organization liquid organization, because something that spills over is something that is moving throughout the terminal according to the demand of services and operations of our customers, depending on our customers and passengers. So a bit the reference framework on the activity levels, which most of you in the airport industry know, the big drop in passenger activity starting in March. In the case of Carrasco, it was 99% drop. Our airport only had international flights, no domestic flights, so it's been a gradual, slow recovery. So today, we have an 85% drop. So in this context, we had to act quickly in view of, starting to work as best as possible and go back to sustainability and to make decisions that would help us so that in a resilient manner, we could face the context. So among other measures that the team took for the Carrasco Airport and operations in general in Uruguay, we wanted to share this example. We merged operational areas, service areas, taking advantage of a government tool that paid for a subsidy, and this is complemented by our company. Here, we worked in this plan, organizational liquid structure plan, by merging these 6 areas in green. You can see here 6 areas under 3 different management units, and each one of this area with a boss per shift, supervising team per shifts, and assistants in different shifts. So we had ground handling operations, CCO, parking areas, passenger services, customer services, under customer experience, all the VIP services, general terminals under the commercial management, and on the air side, operations management that worked on safety and security aspects. So these 6 areas that in the past worked like in silos in different teams, as Lucia mentioned. Well, the new idea was to try to merge them in collaboration teams or areas, and these 6 areas became 2 areas under one single management unit, operations and experience unit, a head of operations and experience per shift, and a supervisor for operations, a supervisor per shift for experience, each one of them with their own assistants or a team. At the same time, on your right and in blue, you can see the new roles that are functional leaders, which in fact are experts, technical people, based on those 6 functions or technical areas the work on improvement processes, change processes, new policies and procedures, manuals, but they don't have hierarchical aspects involved with the day-to-day teams. So the idea of sharing this merge, turning these 6 areas into 2, 3 management units into 1, is to share with you how we did this and how this was a success for our management process, and how we became an adaptable organization, as Lucia was explaining. So first of all, we worked on a manpower plan. We dimensioned the necessary structure. We aligned a new strategic purpose that included what I was mentioning, the liquid coverage, with this integrated team in order to cover physical spaces, work areas, and functions in view of, depending on passenger demand or passenger flow in the terminal, this team moves in order to attend step by step the demand. This manpower plan implied new roles. So we had an integrated team with functional leaders, but also new roles for the whole company, always based on institutionality and collaboration as essential attributes to work in a flexible manner. Well, in order to have sustainability, we diversified the company with a proposal of new services. This integrated team participated in these new services. For instance, I will tell you about 2 experiences we had. The auto cinema that works in the parking area of the airport, and what currently we have a theater also on the terrace of the airport. Another one of the important leverages to show you how we worked on this involved communication. On the one hand, direct communication with our team in a continual manner. On your right, you see Zoom meetings, webinars we had with more than 350 persons at the same time. One of the things that came to stay, one of the good things that came to stay from this sanitation emergency is this new communication channel through Zoom and other available tools. Well, 365 days a day, it's important to be able to transmit information, and Zoom was a very efficient channel in this sense. And all of this work was framed in a detailed communications plan, very rigorous, with these 4 steps or attributes. First, we mapped out the interested parties. We selected or chose the aligned message for each stakeholder we had identified. Then we chose who would be the spokesperson to speak to each stakeholder, then to look for the proper timing. In chronological order, who would speak to whom, at what time, so we could go over the whole plan in a proper and efficient manner. And this communication with all interested parties, well, besides with our internal teams and the labor unions, it was with all agents of the ecosystem, service suppliers, airlines, controlling our institutions too. Another one of the pillars of our plan or change process involved revising processes. And here we wanted to share that professionally, emotionally, we went through different phases. At the beginning, the review of processes was an emergency for survival purposes. If we wanted to be sustainable and be as best as possible, we had to improve continuously. And then we decided that this was here to stay, and we had to have continuous improvement processes. As Lucia was saying a while back, we tried to deepen further and massify some attributes that our company had restricted for some key areas, but today we are throughout the whole company. We have data science to make proper decisions and new expeditious technologies. And we have digital processes, and we're incorporating technology in all areas in a cross-section or mainstreaming throughout the whole company. And finally, capacity building, or how. The last key part in this process of change and merging areas involved capacity building or training, reskilling, upskilling processes, knowledge that had been in individual silos before. We had to expand the role, this role, and to learn how to work with new standards for customer attention or service, or maybe ramp operators suddenly had to come in and take over and assist the CPO. And this function of knowledge started to happen naturally in a genuine manner. We started to share our knowledge across the different platforms or areas. This happened naturally, and we formalized this in our training plans. This is part of our continuous process of learning and unlearning, the way we do things now. Capacity building is a perfect example of what Lucia mentioned today, of the work network teams, or working in networks, how we combine traditional hierarchies with work with networks, with different networks, how the different managers, operation managers, functional leaders, well, are involved in all different phases of implementation and evaluation and incorporation of new aspects. And well, in fact, this can be summarized as a great change in our company that involves what we want in the future. We want to be an agile, expeditious company that learns continuously and is aligned, as Lucia mentioned, it's aligned with an adaptable organization. There were some learned lessons. Well, some, for instance, we had a home office. We had a hybrid system that involved working at home and on site. We had indicators how to measure success in the home office, because we have many indicators. The results continue working properly. There was no loss of information, nor compliance of timeframes for reporting, for instance, and also indicators of how successful we are being. And our continuous improvement is embedded in all areas through PMs. We're working in different networks and projects. As I was telling you, we have a dual structure, and definitely, well, we're like molding a different type of work culture. And in view of complying with our time, I just want to tell you we have 3 thrusters: agility, flexibility, and continuous learning as a synonym for change. So here, well, you will receive a copy of our presentation so you can see more deeply about these aspects. What we want to build is a shared language with all our collaborators. When we talk about agility, expeditiousness, we want to talk about the same. We want to be on the same mindset, all of us. And finally, my last slide involves sharing with you what was our invitation to our team to add itself to this new management model and this new umbrella. Together, a new travel. We are inviting our collaborators to be part of this future change and strategic change. Well, on my behalf, thank you very much for your time. I leave you with Alcira, and I'm at your service for any question you can have at the end of the presentations. Thank you, Fernando. Before moving on to Alcira, I just want to remind you that as you've been able to see, the chat function is not enabled. The questions will be done through this email address at the end of the presentations. If you have a question, send it to this email address and you let us know who you are addressing the question to. Without any further ado, Alcira, please. Thank you very much, Francisco. Good morning to everyone. In this opportunity, Corporación QUIPORT wants to tell you a bit how we have faced the pandemic and what have been our strategies. In fact, at the beginning of March, what were we facing? Well, our operations levels had dropped, as Fernando mentioned. Commercial flights had dropped. This affected our collaborators since there was a drop in work in some areas. On the other hand, there was a lack of knowledge how the pandemic was going to evolve. And at the same time, in Ecuador, at the airport, we started to feel the infection, COVID infection. We started to have uncertainty, quarantines, and lockdowns. So we started working with new scenarios on budgets, limitations, and we started to adopt new ways of managing labor aspects in our ways of working at the airport, since we were coming up with new parameters and regulations with whom we counted in Quito. Of course, we had the organization, leaders and teams and collaborators. We in QUIPORT departed from the strategy that was to adapt the biosafety protocols and to provide short, mid, and long-term protocols that would allow safety, security at the airport, so our collaborators would come to work relaxed, and also the users of the airport would feel trust in spending time in our facilities, as Lucia mentioned, which is now what the users are looking for, levels of safety and peace of mind that airports have. This would contribute to economic development of the country and city, and we were focused on opening up operations on June 1st, since after March 12th, once the emergency was declared and then the closing of commercial operations, we were focused on opening up in June 1st. All of this with a shared purpose, as Lucia mentioned, the shared purpose between the organization, collaborators, airlines, authorities, aeronautical authorities, authorities in the country, that was together we will come out ahead. As a fundamental pillar, watching over our staff, their holistic health, their family environment, and their surroundings, and accompanying them in the different phases of ways of work we were implementing. So at the organizational level, we started to generate new ways of working. Once the emergency was declared in March 12, on March 13, QUIPORT sent 39% of its collaborators home. The difference is we continued working at the airport. A group of them had been suspended, but on the other hand, we had to send them to a mixed type of work, and we had to have our specialized people by law working. This was so dynamic that since March we started with the new labor working types. We've had a new hybrid or mixed way of working and on site on the offices too. It's important to mention that this strategy of labor shifts has allowed us that those people that had been suspended at the beginning of the pandemic, so that later on, when we restarted operations, we could recover some people with new processes and with the new requirements. The second point is digital adaptation that we had to embrace. Connectivity mechanisms to access information, safety, security, and information, communication with on-site and remote teams. So overnight, without having a work scheme, we were forced to maintain continuity of the business without affecting daily activities. On the other hand, the organization also looked into the well-being of our collaborators. And if our collaborators are safe in coming to work, they will do their best work for our customers and users. So we adopted a new well-being plan, a holistic plan focused on how to live during the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic, mental health, telework. In Ecuador, in July and August, we had our vacations period. Most schools in Ecuador are still closed, and we opened up some workshop periods with collaborators and their children. So there was a coexistence, quality time moments during the pandemic. On the other hand, the leaders and work teams adopted a new way to leadership in times of pandemic. This meant to become a leader with empathy that understood the new realities of their collaborators, but also that had to properly dimension the new procedures that must be adapted. And in this sense, I like the phrase that Fernando had, those processes that due to survival we had to implement, since the pandemic made us change our way of working, to do things more expeditiously, to reinvent ourselves, to dimension our internal work capacity in the different areas, and to communicate with other areas, so somehow informally maybe, but respecting the organizational structures, the teams would complement each other. And in this case, it comes to mind teamwork with EHS, with operations, medical departments, facilitation, VIP services, before the reopening the airport in June 1st, where we had to design, besides biosafety procedures, the new customers' procedures that would guarantee physical distancing and biosafety procedures. In this sense, several collaborators in different areas, for instance, VIP services, supported the facilitation process to cover those physical spaces so that passenger flows would be under the new distancing normality. On the other hand, we had the whole base team, the ones that drive the buses for customers, but we had to redesign functions, and they came in to work in different operational areas, in some tasks that were not being provided anymore, or services that were not being provided anymore. All of this with previous training and a natural post-training. And currently, what are we facing? We have a logistics support project. We have administrative areas that with this new timeframes during the pandemic, well, they come to support the passenger terminal to provide directions to the passenger flows and others. This is how the leaders and work teams synchronized almost naturally and due to survival in order to face the new demands and new processes that COVID was leaving us. Also very important, the experience of the collaborator. Even though it's true, we already had the premise that the collaborator must be committed, so that they're motivated, so they give the best of themselves. So, well, currently we had different adaptations that the collaborators had to work on. Well, collaborators went home where the family routines changed. Well, they were working at home, the children were studying at home, but nonetheless, our collaborators never stopped their productivity levels, and they demonstrated lots of commitment and compliance under a new modality that QUIPORT had never seen before. Besides, also family routines were changed. And for those collaborators that had to come to the office, to the terminal building, their family aspects were altered too, because their families maybe remained at home, family routines changed a bit, the care for our children changed. So, but they found a way to work on this. Here we can mention resilience, productivity, and how clever our collaborators were, up to a point that our competency system, today we're incorporating 3 new competencies we did not have before. And during the pandemic, we saw it was very important to model this new behavior that would allow the QUIPORT in time would become a more expeditious and agile corporation. Additionally, also collaborators complied with their daily work, but we generated many additional projects. Accounting, accounting aspects were done remotely during the established timeframes, and, and many other cases that we worked on. On the other hand, and what's very important, the knowledge, per se knowledge of people or persons and collaborators, how we work remotely, how we worked on a hybrid system, how we worked at the airport, how the different multidisciplinary teams worked. Lucia mentioned that we need to learn to see each other, into each other, how we work with each other. So when something is enabled, I will know what's the best way of working and take the best advantage out of this. All of this was accompanied by several motivational campaigns, one of them that we launched with our leaders, our directors, and it was a message for the whole corporation, telling them, here we are, together we will come out ahead. This campaign later had a bit of transformation where we had collaborators, where anyone could send a support message of empathy, solidarity, but they were also laying bridges to offer support, to offer resources, or even though it was remotely. So the different areas and learn lessons, or different areas could ask for support if it was necessary at any point in time. This was the first step to have open communications, to face the crisis pandemic, and to demonstrate that together we would come out ahead. Almost to finish, what have we learned during the pandemic? What have we learned throughout all these months? Flexibility of the organization, of the leaders, teams is fundamental to face any crisis. This flexibility that will break barriers and structures where communication networks can be more than a formality, can be much more than a formality, because this is when we saw how the teams assisted during the new processes, the new requirements. We learned that the leader must have empathy, because his support and empathy and the trust he generates on the team will allow that the teams function properly and the teams can adapt to new circumstances. Also, we complied with by watching over our collaborators. Some simple things like having a screen to measure temperature, adapting touchless, seamless technologies so collaborators would feel safe, offering them all possible services. So at the same time, they would offer their best services to our customers. Another big learning, important learning, is that we broke distancing barriers. In the past, we had not conceived in working remotely. Of 39% that we started working remotely, currently we have different schemes. Today we have 10% pure telework or remote work and 49% on a mixed system. 3 days at home and 4 days on site. But we were able to test. We did not stop doing anything and complying with all efficiency standards. It was also very important to learn that resilience and the capacity to adapt is fundamental. The passion that our collaborators demonstrated for their work, their activities, was our biggest strength, because we had teams that were highly committed and they gave it all to face this crisis. We also had the support of many of the service areas where we saw that many of the projects and processes were in-house, were done in-house. The teams gave the best of themselves. We defined ourselves. And maybe in the past, we would not have been able to deliver as much. Finally, we started rethinking on our processes. We started to think differently on the needs of the collaborators, of the users, passengers. We started to look into the new ecosystem. What are the new needs that we will be facing? The fact of questioning our processes, the fact of modifying them, adapting them, be it for survival or to anticipate things, has been key during this time. These learnings have allowed that we handle somehow these months of the pandemic, but we're certain that those will allow us to focus little by little on this recovery of our process. Nonetheless, if we go beyond, we also know that small changes generate an adaptable organization. End to end, I wanted to share this line of thought that was also mentioned by Deloitte and Touch. An adaptable organization only emerges when a series of small changes in time happen, and this little by little modifies the DNA of the organization. We believe if the small changes that have been implemented during the crisis, if we incorporate them as part of our culture, little by little, at all organizational levels, be it in organizations, teams, leaders, and collaborators, we will be able to adopt flexibility to change as part of our culture. This is what I had to share with you today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Alcira. Last, we have Carlos of Lima Airport Partners, Managers of Operations, Human Development. Thank you, Francisco. Very interesting, the presentations of my colleagues. I also prepared a presentation to share with you the experience we've had, the importance of adaptability in organizations in times of uncertainty. Well, Lucia, in her presentation, mentioned the time machine. And only a few months back, if we look back, well, we had never thought about what could happen, or that we could have a pandemic like this one. But it came. And these photographs show us how tough it's been for our sector. Like with the other airport experiences, for other airports, for us, it meant a dramatic change in having an airport with many, many passengers. Suddenly, it was shut down. We had to close it down. And this generated that we had to handle or manage a quick overnight adaptation process. Well, some of us would work remotely, for instance. And initially we had lots of resistance of many leaders in incorporating this type of work. So overnight, most of the administrative personnel started working remotely, and there was staff that remained attending cargo flights on site during most of the pandemic. So we had to learn to incorporate new activities in regular flows, where topics linked to safety, operational safety and health were always present. This year definitely leaves us important lessons and an enormous learning of all changes we had to work on to be able to continue coming ahead with our operations. We in human development areas, together with other areas where we work closely with, we developed a plan that we called engagement plan to be close to our collaborators so we would all be connected with information, being close to them, orienting them on issues, topics that were relevant for the organization. And at the end, this engagement plan, the purpose was not only to connect adaptable organizational culture, and it makes sense, for instance, and with everything Lucia mentioned, it makes even more sense. First of all, we made the decision for change. The directors of the company made the decision we needed a change to be able to build, but to get ready to operate any airport also. And that change decision was materialized mostly this year due to an organizational transformation and the incorporation in the new high direction of a new facilitating role that will allow us to make these changes. In this new unit, we involve all areas that provide support to administration, uh, managing people, sustainability aspects too. This decision has generated that we have a change in mindset, a change in how we need to start to do things, from behavioral aspects, how we react, how we work. This cultural change is being designed and prepared. It's also an element that will be determinant. So we can take an organization like ours to be more adaptable. And during this transit, we have a change in our mindset and culture. We're looking at the strategy in a different manner. And this is how, in this slide, I show you how we used to define our business strategy. As you can see here, there are some pillars that are part of this strategy, and each one of these pillars constitutes the specialized work of the teams. And what we can see in this organizational type is a focus much centered in the internal functioning or functions. And this marks the cultural way of how it used to be. And this involves simple work, to not incorporate so much the focus of our customers, users, and not incorporate, as Lucia was mentioning, our ecosystem, the other stakeholders that are basic, important in the business, transcendental. But now we have changed this way of looking at our business, and we are incorporating it in the following manner. We have incorporated an administration model that the purpose is that we, as LAP, as the airport, are more than an airport. And we don't see these priorities so functional anymore, but we have interlinked topics that are connected through a sustainable management model. Our strategy now has this focus on sustainability of the business, and this will allow us to make more cross-section, mainstreamed type of work, more integrating between all the areas of the company. This generates the first steps where we have advanced already in order to build on this more adaptable type of administration. And in this purpose of GDH, which is my area, our value purpose will be to enable the company strategy and value strategy as organization. And this is what we're working on at the moment, because what I showed you in the change in strategy is linked in looking our ecosystem, our surroundings in a different manner. And then we will compile all of this and involve organizations, teams, leaders, and workers, as Lucia had mentioned in her presentation. This is our path. Our path currently, it's going to be difficult because there's a lot of unlearning to do during this administration, and a lot of pain, because to move the basis of or status quo, or how we used to work on areas and processes in the past will be difficult. But we have all the support and sponsorship of the high executives, high direction, and the purpose is to become or be more than an airport. This is all I had, and I end my participation here. Thank you very much, Carlos, for your presentation. Unfortunately, we have very little time left for questions. Anyway, We remind you, you can send your questions to this email address. We will be sharing the answers, the questions to the panelists, but we can answer one at this moment that I received. I think besides Lucia, this could be a question for all presenters. Please tell us what are the challenges you have faced in each one of your organizations, and you've had to make these modifications in order to adapt your organizations. Please, each of you have 3 minutes to answer. Well, I can start from what we have seen in general. The reality is that more than difficulties, these are opportunities, but to break with a mindset or a way or a previous way of operating. So to be able to break down with these silos, which were our traditional ways of operating. Now we have different objectives. We know what we do internally in our area. So I think one of the first steps is to be able to have this mainstream cross-section connection, to be able to connect between all of us. This is one of the priority focuses we have identified. Of course, all panelists shared this. We need to work together with the leaders and with them. If you allow me, my contribution along the same line, I believe the commitment or to be able to help people in such a deep change like this one has 3 or 4 pillars. Like any change process is transcendental. First, the first one involves that this is based in trust. And we like to talk about the guiding thread a lot. This process started years ago in function of the values, strategic purposes of the company. But this is like new areas or branches, like restarting again, like readapting what we had been working on in the past with our teams. So trust is one of the pillars. Another pillar is participation. We are involving 100% of everyone through workshops, area by area, where we have this continuum that Lucia mentioned of the adaptable organization. And in every area, the management, mid-management, and the personnel participate. So participation is an important basis for engagement and for all transformation processes. Leadership, as Lucia mentioned, very close-knitted leadership is important. Corporación América Uruguay has been working on this for years in developing this type of leadership and style. And finally, leadership, which is part of leadership competencies. Well, we need to have timely and transparent communication, and this is key in this transformation process. It's strategic and cultural. If you allow me, in this sense, something that has been a big challenge is to stop doing things the way we had been doing them. If we were doing them well or excellent, well, now they don't work anymore. The pandemic has questioned our ways of working, our processes, and it's to learn and unlearn. Maybe this change in mindset or anticipate things is something that we have done, but it's more difficult because it's moving when we had been doing some things well. And something that is key also here is the support contribution of the leaders, because we're not only talking about the high leaders or executives of the organization, but leaders that exist in all organizational levels, because it's together with them where we will introduce these changes, this new way of doing things, and this new adaptation. I think this is what I can emphasize. On my behalf, and a bit going back to what Alcira mentioned, the movement. More than ever, today more than ever, we are organizations that don't have to be stagnated in the way we work or in an organizational manner, traditional one. Well, for us, it's true that during this transformation process, it's very relevant the role that the high direction or high management has, and the guide or orientation that must be established throughout the whole organization. But it's also relevant all the initiatives that, once we understand what we want to do, arise from the other levels of the organization. So we are always have movements. On the one hand, we achieve the purpose of our company, and also compiling, putting together all initiatives that arise from the different elements and levels of the organization, not everything from up to down. We need to learn and rescue from down to up. For instance, some initiatives that have happened from operational areas. This is a way of learning too. And we need to capitalize on this ability or skill. Thank you very much, Carlos. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time left for more questions. Anyway, as I mentioned before, if you have any questions for the panelists, please send them to this email address on your screen, and we will send them to the presenters. We will also send you the presentations. We will upload the recordings also, and you will receive the recordings in the next few hours. Without any further ado, thanks to the panelists for preparing the presentations and sharing your experiences. And well, we'll see you in the next webinar. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.